Hi everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and wellbeing expert working in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions, and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast starts now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. My guest today is Guy Proctor, editor of Britain's best-selling countrywalking magazine of the same name. Guy and his team are the creators behind the viral global hashtag and challenge Walk 1,000 Miles, endorsed by major celebrities, sports associations and walking groups from around the world. In 2018, I took on the challenge myself and walked from Land's End to John O'Groats here in the UK and clocked up a whole 1,200 miles in 90 days. When I found myself losing heart, I turned to the Walk 1,000 Miles Facebook page, which in Guy's own words is the happiest place on earth, and it truly is. On the show, we talk about what it takes to change your lifestyle, how walking can save your mental health, a tragedy from Guy's past that ultimately became his bravest moment, and about the challenges one might face when walking the ambitious 1,000 miles. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to our guest today, editor of Country Walking magazine, Mr. Guy Proctor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I'm going to push you right into the deep end. I want you to imagine that it's a sunny day, your boots are right next to your front door, and you're going to go for a walk. Where do you go?
To be honest, we always say that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and the journey starts at your front door. So I'd be quite happy to walk straight out my front door into the fields where I live. I live just on the edge of Lincolnshire. And I'm as happy 5 minutes from my home as I am 5 hours into the fells. You know, it almost doesn't matter to me where I'm walking. Something about the motion of one's feet and the body, it just feels right. It feels like home to me.
So there's something that comes up quite a lot in your magazine, which I'm absolutely passionate about, and that is the mental health bonus of being outdoors. And I know that a lot of people at this time of year, they're trying to make those fitness goals happen, and most of the time they'll join a gym. How would you persuade them to instead, just as you said, step out of their front door and take to walking instead?
Your body has spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving to be very, very good at one thing in particular, and that's walking. You know, almost everything in your body is designed to make walking more easy, more efficient, more pleasurable, just the natural thing to do. And it's no wonder that through walking, your body finds its natural kind of base setting. It sets a very low expectation from you. And it's not like you take up a hobby like golf, or you take up rock climbing or something. You can see that there's a very steep learning curve. It's very much, right, let's get to the next level. And we've got some very expensive new kit that will help you get to the next level. And you feel like you're getting in at the bottom of something. Whereas with walking, particularly with the kind of walking we talk about, as soon as you step outside your front door, you're doing it. You're doing the thing. And that's the whole of the hobby. You understand it. Your body responds to it. It feels good. It feels natural. And it's like you're Tiger Woods at walking, almost on the first time you do it, you know. And the other great thing about walking is that when you go to the gym, you compare yourself to people, and you are, you know, a gym is a great amplifier for that little voice in your head that we've all got, which is saying you're not good enough, you're sweaty, you're out of shape, you know, oh, people are probably looking at you. And it's I don't need that voice amplifying in my head. None of us do. And when you're outside, you don't get that at all. You're probably on your own. You're surrounded by beautiful countryside. You're surrounded by small sights that are delightful to you. You know the shapes of leaves, little bird song, the sound of a skylark, whatever, and it's instantly, it quiets that little voice in your head, and it boosts you up, and it says you're part of a world, a beautiful, physical, organic, smelly, rich, real world, and you're part of it, and you're a welcome part of it. And I think that feels fantastic. And I get that in the course of 20 minutes on a walk, and it just gets better from there. Walking repays you from the moment you start doing it, and the benefits accumulate quickly, substantially, meaningfully. Just give us 7 days. Walk every day. Walk some distance every day, even if it's only half an hour. And at the end of those 7 days, ask yourself, do I feel better for having done that or not? Because I know that they'll at the end of that, they'll say, do you know what, I feel better, I look a bit better, I sleep a bit better, I'm definitely going to do this. I've never been very comfortable as a salesman. I'm very happy writing about things that I really believe in, and that's easy, and being enthusiastic about it. But I find it hard to bullshit people and say, buy this, because it's good for my company or good for my business. But when it's something I so wholeheartedly believe in, and I know it will repay them way more than it repays me, that's such a win-win situation, isn't it? And I can honestly say, whenever we put this magazine together, all of us in the team put our hearts into that thing. And yes, it's, what is it these days? £4.70. It's quite a lot of money. It's not that much compared to a pint of beer these days, but we put our hearts into that, and I can stand behind everything in that mag and say that's the best we could do, and we really believe you're gonna love it.
I think that's why it touches so many people on an emotional level, because at first, from a personal perspective, I came across you because I was doing the Land's End to John O'Groats walk, and I was finding it tough at the beginning. I was 2 weeks in. Like you said, I didn't do any training for it. I just left my front door and sort of did it. And I ended up with blisters everywhere, and I'd done everything a little bit wrong to begin with. And so I just Googled, how do you walk 1,000 miles? And instantly, Country Walking magazine came up, your social media group on Facebook came up, and I joined it on the spot. And just put my feelers out. I was like, guys, I'm struggling with blisters, how can I help? And I think even you replied to one of the things. I didn't know at the time that you were, the editor of this particular magazine. And through that whole entire journey, you can really tell the kind of readers that you have, because they're so supportive, they're so encouraging, and they're really responding to your writing. And a lot of people might say, why would I bother buying a magazine called Country Walking magazine? What am I going to find in the content? And I turn around and I say, you've got cards you can cut out with special walks on, you can learn how to use a compass, you're learning about mental health, and you've got such a variety of news and things going on in there for people to try, especially if they're just starting out.
Well, people often say to me, how do you fill a magazine about walking every month? Because it's left, right, isn't it? I know how to do it. And I sympathise with that, because that is a problem for us, in the sense that that's your first impression. When you say it's a magazine about walking, it's like saying, would you like to read a magazine about paint drying? Well, no, thank you. I don't need to. I know how to do that already. But actually, walking is everything. It's about being a human being who's making their way in the world on foot. And it's about everything you see, everything you touch, everything you taste, everyone you talk to. It's about history, it's about geology, about botany, about birds, animals, about shared experiences. But the problem was, and this is really one of the impetuses for the whole Walk 1,000 Miles project, was we were sitting there and we were thinking, right, walking is not a very sexy subject matter. Okay? It doesn't sort of leap off the newsstand and say, hey, I'm going to be a magazine that you're going to be proud to leave on your coffee table, So we need something which has more social transmissibility, and Walk 1,000 Miles, if you say to someone, I'm doing Walk 1,000 Miles, people think, well, that sounds impressive. Yeah. That's something I want to know about. But it's also something I clearly understand. But if you say, I'm reading a Country Walking magazine, it's a much slower sell, so we kind of thought, we initially conceived of Walk 1,000 Miles as almost like a Trojan horse for our walking brand, because we knew that people would enjoy walking if they just tried it, and we just had to induce them to try it. And then they would find their way to the magazine, and they'd realise it was a wonderful thing, and everything would be good. And I'm glad to say that is actually what's happened, and you're a great example, because you would never have found us on your walk by searching for country walking. But Walk 1,000 Miles has become something which has bobbed, because so many people have searched for it and talked about it. It's bobbed us right up to the top of search rankings, and now strangers are coming to us from all corners of the earth. We had Brian, who was a goat herder from Namibia. We've got Abby Said, who's a guide on Kilimanjaro. We've got people in Iceland, Sweden, Tanzania. I met some people in my local nature reserve who were over from Tanzania, and they do walk 1,000 miles. They had no idea that I lived around there, and we just bumped. And it's like Walk 1,000 Miles has made me realise there are connections waiting for me to be made all around the world with people who are happy to be able to say, Walk 1,000 Miles has allowed me to come out and say, hey, I do this for fun. This is me, and it's not like I've come out and say I'm into something which really is shaming and makes me...
It's so sociable, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's the good thing about Walk 1,000 Miles, and particularly the Facebook group, is that walking is something that lots of people like to do on their own, and that's fine. And I say to people, I like to walk alone too. It doesn't make me antisocial. It makes me feel, when I get back from a walk, in a better position to rejoin the human race and feel more worthy of their company myself, and it makes me feel like I've got something to share with them. I want to tell you about the things I've seen, and it's delightful that people can feel like some people have spent years feeling alone and isolated, and in some way isolated by the fact that they consider themselves walkers, because it's not until quite relatively recently that's not marked you out as anything other than a little bit of a weirdo. And they've been able to plug into this mothership called Walk 1,000 Miles and see there's loads of people out there, all different shapes and sizes and types, who share this interest too, and they can connect either in the real world or just virtually and say, I'm part of something that reflects well on me, and these people have got my back. And that's just a wonderful thing to feel like we've helped create.
It's, I mean, from a personal perspective, like I said, I was really looking forward to this interview today for the pure fact that you and I had never met, and yet you'd had such this massive influence on myself and also on my dad. And I'll talk a little bit about him. So my dad was diagnosed with kidney cancer on the exact date that I'd started my Walk 1,000 Miles the year before. And it was a big devastation. He's a middle-class guy. He's always been self-sufficient, never really considered himself to be a victim of any kind of, thing. And I'm not saying that, you have that kind of mentality, but it crushed him. And in that moment of almost mental despair or mental shock, he needed a focus. And lo and behold, Country Walking magazine, hi Dad, look at this. Oh, I'm going to do the 1,000 mile challenge. Every day that he was feeling anxious, he'd go out and he'd walk, and it changed his life. It changed his perspective from that place, giving him that focus. And now, even this year, we've almost become competitive with it. So we're both going to do the 1,000 mile challenge this year, and already we've got our tracker cards that you get with the magazine. We're like, oh, what have you done today? Oh, yes, I've done that. I've got that. Let's do this over the weekend. And it's almost brought us closer together because now we've got a common interest, which before, we're quite outdoorsy people, but now we've got a goal, and it's a big goal. And for people that are going through situations like that, I mean, you must get it all the time from your readers saying, I've had this go on, I've had this personal emotional trauma happen in my life, and actually this has saved me. Absolutely.
It staggers me. I almost sort of stumbled into this. I've always been passionate about walking for my own ends. I've always been passionate about magazines. I love doing it, and I love it when readers say, oh, your magazine's helped me in some way. But launching this Walk 1,000 Miles thing and seeing it take off and touch people's lives, it's like I've sort of I've scratched at something, and something is torn open, and all this wonderful good news and happiness and positivity has fallen out on me, and it's completely deluged me.
Wow.
And literally almost every day I read another story on Walk 1,000 Miles about someone who was bereaved, and they've rebuilt their sense of self using walking or using the community, or they've lost an enormous amount of weight and they can't believe how they're willing to have a photo taken of them again, for the first time in years. Or, lots and lots of people who've said they've struggled with depression or anxiety all their lives privately. And they're here, they're able to not only do something which is actually effective against both of those things, but they're able to come out and say to these people, this is what I have struggled with, and they themselves are deluged with support and love, and that non-judgmental comfort of strangers, which is actually such nectar for people, because it's very hard for people to talk to people who are in their sort of family or social networks already and say, hey, I've got this problem, because we've all got kind of stock invested in our social networks, and we don't want to see our stock take a dive by admitting something that we fear might be shameful. But you can do that in a group of friendly strangers, like Walk 1,000 Miles, because they don't know you. And I remember one person in particular, Fiona, who had a horribly messy divorce. I don't know the details, but she had. I think she was bullied in her relationship, and it had, knocked her confidence down and made her very, very depressed and unhappy. And her friend, she was talking to a friend, and I think her friend suggested, "Hey, I'm a member of this Walk 1,000 Miles group. Get amongst it." And she did, and she was terribly timid. She was, because I think she didn't think she was even worth being,
bless her.
other people engaging with.
Yeah.
And so she did Walk 1,000 Miles last year, and she's still doing it. And at the end of the year, she said, she's come off these drugs that she was on, that she said were making her feel like a zombie. And you can see she's absolutely radiant in her sense of, I'm all right, I'm all right.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's wonderful that you can come into this challenge, and you can come into walking, and we don't need to know what's wrong with you. Guarantee 6 months' time, you'll look back at that person, you think, oh, come on, come in, come quicker. This is going to be really good. And it's like a universal Swiss Army knife of a thing, And no matter what ails you, walking is good for you. And like you said, we all need a sense of purpose. And we don't have an everlasting, renewing sense of purpose. You go to school, your purpose is to make friends and be cool enough, and then you've got to find a girlfriend, and then you've got to go to university, and then you've got to get a job, and all these purposes for you are self-generating. And then you get into that long stretch of adulthood, and it stretches out before you. And this, not all of us want to be promoted at work up and up and up to great heights of even harder work, and bigger salaries and less satisfaction. So it's no wonder that a lot of us get into our 30s and our 40s and start looking around thinking, well,
what's it all about?
What's it all about? And you might want a BMW or a golf club membership. And something as seemingly as trivial as walking 1,000 miles, you can laugh it off and say, well, it's a silly ambition. It's a sort of a Dan Dare thing, isn't it? But yes, it is a Dan Dare thing. Walk 1,000 miles. There is something in you which responds to, I dare you. I dare you to do something. I double dare. And, it's almost like gamifying your daily life. Can I do this? Can I walk 2 3/4 miles a day? Well, yeah, I probably can. And when you've done it for 2 or 3 days on the trot, you think, I don't want to stop this chain of good, happy little daily things. I want to keep that going, see how far I can keep it going. And actually, it's the having that purpose, almost no matter what the purpose is, whether the purpose itself isn't meaningful, that itself is a good thing, which is why I've always enjoyed working in specialist magazines. I've worked in photographic magazines and outdoor magazines and motorcycle magazines, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not the particular subject matter that matters. It's that you have an interest. You know, that itself is a virtuous circle to be interested and to be told, that's all right, this is brilliant, let's go on this journey together.
Yeah.
And it, you know, I'm most at home in walking because that most completely overlaps with my sense of what is good for me, and what's good for the planet, you know.
Talking of which, I mean, you know, we talk about people choosing between going to a gym or getting themselves outside and walking. One of the things that I really love about the magazine in particular is that you do look at the carbon footprint of equipment, of outdoor gear and all of that stuff. And you have some really good hints and tips, don't you, for the kind of equipment, if you're looking at the planet and you're trying to gauge your carbon footprint and make a difference, you've got great suggestions for them in terms of what you need to go out and do that, you know, proudly as a walker, because there's so much gumph you could buy. You could buy special boots, you could buy hats and gloves and blah, blah, blah. But tell your listeners now, from an eco perspective, I mean, what do you use when you go out for walking? What do you need, and how can you protect your carbon footprint when thinking about brands?
Well, one of the things actually that I've said in various of my editorials, because I seem to write the same editorial hundreds of different ways every month.
Always amuses me though, guys.
It's when you walk, you find you need and you want less, because I think it's your there's something in your head, a little devil of a voice, which is saying, you know, like I said before, you're not good enough. You haven't got enough stuff. You haven't got enough bling. You know, you haven't got a big enough house, a good enough car, blah blah blah. And if you're spending a lot of time in a sedentary position, those things can gnaw at you, and those things can seem meaningful, especially if you work in an office like this. When you go out, none of those things seem to matter, and it seems like that was a delusion. That was a strange delusion. And, you know, I sometimes am nervous about bringing people into our office, because I look at my colleagues around me, the ones who aren't directly involved in new gear testing, and me as well. We look quite shabby. And the reason is we walk.
I feel you, I'm a musician, so I get it.
Yeah, fine. We walk and we get used to a pair of boots that we're comfy in.
Yeah.
And we get used to the kind of clothes we're wearing, and we don't want to let go of them, you know. And there's a real pleasure in actually patching things up and making things last. And what I try and make the emphasis with when I'm talking about gear is, we all need good gear. We all need a good waterproof. We all need good boots at some point. If we're going to take walking seriously and we're going to enjoy it for the long term, it's important you make the right purchase. So it's something you can have a long-term relationship with, and you won't get frustrated with after 6 months or 2 years, and it won't wear out after that length of time. So all of our recommendations are about gear which has both a story which you can hold your head up and say, yeah, I know the story behind how this fabric was made, or how its end of life is going to be handled, and B, which you're happy to have a long-term relationship with, because ultimately, the culture of disposability is really the big problem, because we don't need to keep chucking new stuff into this void if we don't have to keep throwing stuff away, you know. So that's my approach to it, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Okay, I want to take you back a little bit, way back, into your childhood. Because, I mean, listening to you now, I mean, it's so obvious how passionate you are about your subject matter and about your work. Were you always an outdoorsy kind of guy, or were you kind of a recluse writing away in your bedroom? What was the deal there?
I wasn't an outdoorsy guy at all. I hated walking, and the reason I hated walking because my dad forced me to do it.
Same. If you're listening, Dad.
my dad was in the Air Force, and he still is a great, important man. But he was the boss of an RAF base in RAF Carlisle, which is within stone's throw of the Lake District.
Wow.
And it was there he decided that it would be good for the morale of his officers, his staff, if they kept physically fit. And so he got involved with this hill walking club, and that was his first introduction to hill walking himself. And he became passionate about it, and he would go walking with his guys it's an excuse to have a day off every month, I think it was. And they'd take one of the Air Force minibuses and they'd drive to the lakes, and they'd do big hill walks. And I think that was, he taught himself to map read, and he started, another guy at the RAF base came up with a list of the highest 100 hills in the Lake District. It wasn't, doing the Wainwrights wasn't a big thing in those days. And that became like my dad's passion, was ticking off these highest 100 hills in the Lake District. And every weekend, and I was rather, my dad, like many of us with our fathers, think of them as quite an imposing man, and one day I'll probably have to grow up and be a bit like you. So I felt like when he had said, "Do you want to go for a walk at the weekend?" I had to say yes. So he didn't force me, but I felt obliged to do it. And I think back now, and I'd done the highest 100 hills in the Lake District with him by the time I was 11 or something like that.
Crikey.
And we had a lot of what I look back on now as exciting, hairy, exhilarating experiences. And I experienced whiteouts with him and terrifying gales, and what seemed to me like long days of adventure. At the time, always thinking, I can't wait to be at home on my computer, or I can't wait for Dad to be away, so one weekend I don't have to do this. But it was like laying down layers of compost, and it would eventually kind of rot down in my memory into this rich mulch. And it wasn't until I was at university, really, that my mind, and I was sort of stressed about study and exams and stuff, my mind would wander back to those hills where my dad had taken me, and I found that it was a real source of solace to me, and those memories are precious. And I sort of thinking, right, now I'm not under duress or obligation to do it. I actually want to do it. and I started walking in the holidays. I started doing long distance trails. And
this is whilst you were at university?
This is while I was at university, yeah. I think I did the first one at school, actually. I did the Pennine Way when I was in sixth form.
Oh my goodness.
And,
what, the full Pennine Way?
Yeah, the full Pennine Way.
Guy, that's insane.
Well, I think I was looking for something that my dad hadn't done.
Yeah.
And I would think,
and you could go, yes, I've done it.
Yeah. And I did the Pennine Way, and I think to my enormous gratification at the end of that, he said something which sounds ludicrous now, but he said, "You went away a boy and you came back a man."
Brilliant.
Which ultimately, it's cringy, but you do want to hear that.
It's the medal from your dad, isn't it? That's
exactly.
the thing you long for in your life.
Yes. And so I did a series of long distance walks with friends from university who I would corral into doing it. And then when I was at university and I was increasingly stressed about my finals, I thought I need to have something else to think about. So I planned to do the John O'Groats to Land's End walk, and that was fantastic because it gave me something else to think about that was completely unconnected with what I was doing. And I read the John Hillaby Journey Through Britain,
which is a classic. And anyone listening to this, I just have to interrupt you, Guy. Please go out and get it. It's just fabulous to read, isn't it?
Yeah, and Andrew McCloy's guidebook to walking Land's End to John O'Groats, actually. And that just gave me somewhere to go in my head whenever I was feeling stressed. And I planned it, and I did it in the summer after graduating. And it was just, it was partly work avoidance. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and
Can I ask, what were you studying at the time? Were you in media studies?
No, I was English literature.
Okay, fabulous.
But it was a very traditional course, so I had to read a lot of Victorian thick,
doorstops. Oh no,
Victorian novels. So, but anyway, so I went away and did this walk, and I backpacked that because I didn't have enough money to spend all those nights in B&Bs or anything. And it's fantastic, and I think it was exhausting, and it was sometimes rather lonely because I walked through Scotland with a friend of mine who was himself Scottish, was only interested in walking through his own country. So we got to the Scottish border, and I was hoping to hook up with another English friend to carry on walking. But it turned out by the time we'd spent 4 weeks walking through Scotland, I was so fit that my friends couldn't keep up with me. So I had a friend with me for a few days, but in the end he had to bail out, and I thought, sod this, I'm going to carry on my own. So I carried on my own, on my long, lonely adventure, and I would camp it's far from being entirely rural every metre of Britain. So I'd camp, on the edge of some roadside verges and some industrial estates, and occasionally my tent would get let down around me by kids, my tent pegs stolen. But it was great. And the way this joins up with my present life, ultimately, is that when I finished that after 11 weeks, I think, I felt like that gave me some capital, which was that was in my bank, and that would never go away. So if I wanted to work in an outdoor shop or a gear manufacturer or something outdoorsy, I would always be able to say, I've done that, and then that'll be something. And it was then I discovered, because I was a reader of Trail magazine, which is our sister magazine, that it was produced up the road from me, because I only lived in Brampton, which is only half an hour down the road. So I thought I'll write to them and I'll say, can I come and work with you for free? Mm-hmm. I've done Land's Journal Groats, and I wasn't a very confident young man, but I thought, that was not nothing.
Yeah.
And so they said, yeah, come in. And I claimed the dole, and I worked for about a month on Trail, doing whatever they wanted me to do. And, that was when I discovered, I thought, this is amazing. They look at maps during their work day, and that's a job, and they plan routes. And I thought, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And so I eventually applied for a job on Country Walking, and it turned out that the job on Country Walking as a staff writer was my first paying job. And now I'm here again 25 years later, 30 years later maybe.
Oh, wow. So you had a whole career in between.
So I've had a whole career in between.
I
came back here 4 years ago as editor. So it's got this nice circularity about it.
Do you find that as you're walking, you're thinking as you're walking, oh, this would be great for the magazine? Is your mind a little bit distracted by, oh, I just want to tell the readers that and all the rest of it? Or do you get that space where you can relax and have your own thoughts at the same time?
Yeah, it's funny. I have wonderful staff who work with me, and they are really the engine of creativity on the magazine. So thankfully, I don't have to sit there constantly worrying about how am I going to fill the next few issues. I just so when I'm out walking, I'm actually just topping up my own sense of joie de vivre, and I'm reminding myself of what I constantly profess in the magazine, and reminding myself that it's true.
Yeah.
And actually, we are, all of us, genuinely very curious people, very genuine in our interest in all of the stuff that we write about. Yeah. And so actually, we are texting each other constantly when we're on walks, when we're listening to the radio, when we're at home at the weekend. Did you just hear that thing on Radio 4? Did you just, or I've just seen this thing in the book. There's this mad guy who lived in this stately home down here. He used to keep, I don't know, devil worshippers in his back garden or something. And it's just all endless. It seems to me that there's endless rabbit holes. And that's one of the joys of walking generally. You walk somewhere and you think, well, why is that wall like that? Or why is the hump in the ground like that? And you can follow the story of these things endlessly into history and into culture, and that's really how we find all the stories for our magazine. And actually, one of the great things about walking, I think, and one of my top life tips is to try and be curious about things all the time, because that's your, it's like a shark moving forward. Your curiosity is your teeth, and you need to. Oh, this is a terrible metaphor, but you need to kind of like chomp your way through life, otherwise you'll just drift. And walking is great at stimulating your curiosity, because even in the boring bits of walking, you can think, right, well, what would I rather have? Would I rather have a child's voice or a giant head? And you think...
It really does get to that kind of thinking, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you have all these endless wonderings, and it's really good for your mind.
And your creativity as well, which must come out in your work being a writer.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the big motivations for me, apart from wanting to please readers all the time, is wanting to please my colleagues. And I want to write things where my colleagues will say to me, "Oh, I really enjoyed that," or "I didn't know that," and we're all like that, and it's kind of like a healthy kind of competition where we're all trying to do stuff which will impress the others, and that's a really nice place because I've been on the magazine for nearly 5 years now, and my colleagues have been on the magazine for upwards of 10 years, some of them.
Wow.
And that's a long time in this business. But we were saying this to each other the other day. We all feel like we're still in the first year. It's all like, and it's partly because of Walk 1,000 Miles, because we get a fresh intake of people at the turning point of the year every year, and they've got all the questions that we remember having ourselves, and we're excited for them because we're looking forward to all the things that they're going to do that we've done ourselves and we feel excited about. It's just got this amazing ability, walking has, to renew you and to renew your interest and your curiosity in life generally. So to me, this isn't a magazine about walking. It's a magazine about life generally. It might as well be called How to Be Human or how to live a good life.
It really must, though, because, I mean, some of the things that I love about it, and I've mentioned before, is you get to learn so much, like how to use a compass. I mean, these are things that, unless you've done scouts or guides when you were younger, you just wouldn't know how, because everyone uses GPS. And actually, some of the most beautiful things are learning to use a map, you're learning to use a compass, and when you're in the landscape, knowing that you've got that kind of internal sense of where you're going, and that you can use just a piece of paper to find it. You don't have to surround yourself with technology and all of that stuff, and you've got those skill sets, and you find things like that in a magazine like this. And it is a life skill to know how to do that, to know where the sun's going to be and how to sort of navigate your way around the world. I think it's been, it's just been such a joy for me to read in my life, and it gives me so much pleasure to know that the people producing it are having that same passionate response.
We really are, and I'm so glad to hear that, because if you'd been in this magazine industry 15, 20 years ago, it was a very different when we were looking forward to 2020 then. We were looking at a world without magazines, certainly without paper magazines, because the internet was new, and we thought, we're dinosaurs.
Yeah.
If we're in printed media, we're dinosaurs. The internet's going to come and eat up our audiences. It's going to eat up it's going to do everything for everyone. And we never dreamed that in the magazine, because our magazine's been in growth for the last 5 years, which is fantastic. But there's something about paper and being away from a screen. So you go out for a walk, and I agree, whether it's following a paper map or it's reading a paper magazine, it's connecting you back again with the physical world around you.
Exactly.
And I say to my staff, relish the fact that we're on paper, that we're physical, that we can be screwed up, that we can be cut out. And I'm always trying to think of new ideas for things we can put inside the back cover, whether it be a tick list or a little pub quiz that you can cut out and take and do with your friends, something, because the stuff of life is made of atoms, and paper is a great example of a wonderful molecule. It's not a molecule, is it? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, I'm so glad that we're in the thick of rediscovering the pleasure of the printed product. And you wouldn't believe how much people enjoy being in print. You think their ego would be gratified enough by having seen their photo on social media and received so much peer approval through social media. But actually, when you see your magazine, see your face in Country Walking, people they're cock a hoop.
I know I was.
They're like, I'm going to buy a copy for my mum. It feels really meaningful, especially, and I think that's so wonderful, because when the magazine arrives in the office every month, and we get it roughly about the same time as subscribers, we're terribly excited. It's like Christmas Day again, and we're opening, we're going through, we're laughing at that and wondering about that, and it's great. And I want us always to feel like we share the same excitements that the readers do, and we really do, because the days when magazines could preach down to a grateful readership to whom we were disseminating expert knowledge, those days are gone. The only advantage we have over readers is we have more time to spend on this wonderful hobby than most of them do. So actually, and I think and I hope that that's what the readers recognise in the pages of the magazine, is that when we say we're enjoying things, we're enjoying them in exactly the same way as you do, and we hope you will.
That's fantastic. So we're coming to the end of the interview, sadly coming to the end of the interview. I've so enjoyed it. Of course, it's called The Brave Moment. So I have to ask you, what's your bravest moment that you can pick out?
As I told you, I mentioned I used to work on motorcycle magazines.
Yeah.
And the reason I worked on those was because this media organisation that we work for has a very big motorcycling wing, and it was the original founding element of the company, Motorcycle News, in 1955. And it was regarded as a rite of passage. If you wanted to make progress in the company, you had to spend time on the motorcycling titles, which is what I did. And I had a very nice time for 5 or 6 years. And then I was working on Motorcycle News, and I was riding home a lovely September evening, about 5:30, and I had a crash. I had a terrible crash because a guy pulled out on me, and it was a classic "sorry mate, I didn't see you" crash. Long straight road. He pulled out in front of me, and I crashed, and I flew down the road, and then the next time I came to, it was dark, and there was an ambulance man hunched over me, and I had no idea what had happened. And I remember saying to him, "Are my kids okay? Are my kids okay?" Because I thought I'd had a car crash. And he said, "Your kids are fine. Your kids are fine." And I was relieved by that. And then the next time I came to, I was in the ambulance, and the ambulance wasn't moving, and I thought, what's going on? And the ambulance men were looking concernedly at me, and I said to them, "Am I okay? Am I going to DIE?" Because I didn't want to say the word, but I was concerned. And he said to me, "We're doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen." And I remember thinking, that wasn't a no.
Yeah.
And what had happened was my arm had been 75% amputated in the crash, and I'd suffered various breakages and a great deal of blood loss. And I was losing lots of blood from my brachial artery, which is up here in your shoulder. That was a life-changing accident. And I went to the hospital, and then they fixed me up, and I was in hospital for a month. And but it turned out that my arm would never work again. So I have this arm here, which looks a proper sight. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it was that was my route back to walking. Wow. Because I wanted something which I could still do just as well as anyone else. Because when you lose the use of a limb, it renders you kind of childish in a lot of ways, because you can't tie your own shoelaces.
Yeah.
You can't pick up your own child. You can't.
I can't imagine the frustration.
Yeah.
And I mean, there must have been some kind of level of almost depression and sadness that comes with that, because, like you're saying now, like going back to that mentality of frustration, I suppose, of wanting to do something and not being able to.
Yeah, it's a massive setback.
Yeah.
And you don't really know how your life is going to be. It's because you're not going to be playing the guitar and doing handstands. That's for sure. But walking was something. My legs were okay. I could still walk, and that was part of my convalescence. I would walk, and I started to feel better and stronger and normal again. Because I could just put as I do today, I put my hand in my pocket, and I look normal, and I can walk just fine. And that it helped me to kind of rebuild my sense of self and my sense that there was a future involving me, whether or not I had two working arms, and. It took me a year or two, but I found my way back to country walking, and that is really my journey back to a kind of sunny frame of mind and a hopeful, optimistic way of looking at the future again. Because I realised walking has done this wonderful thing for me. I think we can do some wonderful things with this magazine if we can get the message out to more people more effectively. And that's
Hashtag Country Walking Magazine, listeners.
and that's what Walk 1,000 Miles has enabled us to do. I don't think anyone else knows that my arm doesn't work.
To be honest, I have to be completely frank with you. I didn't notice until you'd actually told me that story.
No, I don't think anyone does know, because I didn't. But I didn't want it to become I didn't want it to define me, and I didn't want it to become a source of pity.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel pitiable. I don't pity myself.
And you certainly don't come across that way either. I mean, you're so positive, considering what you've been through on that emotional level. My goodness, that is quite a story.
Well, I say to people all the time, the human being is an incredibly adaptable animal. And I've observed that about people who've suffered much greater setbacks than I have in the Walk 1,000 Miles group and in life generally. We've got this strange momentum about us. We want to survive and we want to thrive, and we'll find a way. Life finds a way. And my accident is just a tiny example of how that is true. And walking turbocharges that adaptability and that readiness of yourself to reconcile yourself to life as it really is. All the limitations you face, they're okay. My arm doesn't work, but nor can I fly. I'm okay with that. And nor am I 6'5". I'm okay with that. And that's what walking does. It makes you reconcile yourself to the realities of life, and to let you know that that's all right. It's enough.
So good to hear you see that. And again, on the Brave moment, our acronym is Begin, Research, Action, Value and Evolve. And listening to your core values and seeing just how you've evolved with your sport, with your magazine, with your brave moment in your life, and come to this point utterly amazing, Guy. Thank you so much for this incredible interview. Please feel free to share this podcast with your friends. Hashtag the brave moment, hashtag coping to mastery, and thanks a lot for listening. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. As someone who has entered the field of mental health as a therapist, to hear someone so passionate about helping others through their work makes me sing with joy. Not only that, I genuinely feel inspired to get outside more often, knowing that he's right. I am the Tiger Woods of walking as soon as I make that decision to step outside my front door. I really loved his perception of how our bodies were made for movement. That motion can be healing, not only for a body that may need a little encouragement to step forward, but also for how it fires up our minds, how we can feel accomplished and succeed very easily if we join in with Mother Nature, and how no matter what we look like or who we are or even what size we are always welcomed back into her open arms. Guy's enthusiasm for life is infectious, as I'm sure you'll agree, and his connection to the outdoors really gives him a deep insight into what life is truly about, what matters beyond what we think we actually need in our lives. Guy clearly loves his job and has surrounded himself with people that elevate and support him, and he knew from an early age that writing was a part of his future, but he didn't know that he was already shaped by the ideas and actions he took with his father as a child, how now he can reflect on those family moments and feel enriched by them. Finally, Guy saw what was possible when life threw him a curveball. Instead of being held back by injury, he applied himself to what he could do in that brave moment, focusing on what he was capable of and proving that, just as Martin Luther King once said, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. If you liked what you heard today, please go to the website www.walk1000miles.co.uk. You can also subscribe to the magazine at www.greatmagazines.co.uk or find it on readly.com and other major platforms. You can also find it in paper in your local supermarket. Next week, we will be talking to hypnosis and equine therapist Chris Fleet at one of his centres in the beautiful Devon countryside. If you enjoyed what you've heard today, please like, subscribe and review the podcast on all major streaming services, and follow us on Instagram at The Brave Moment Podcast and Facebook at Coping to Mastery. You can also get in touch with the show through Anchor FM or through our Instagram. Have a wonderful week, and remember, your brave moment starts now.